Get out! That is what the woman said before she threw me off the wagon into a blizzard. I was 10 years old, barefoot, with nothing but a piece of frozen bread to my name. She called me dead weight, said I was not worth the food it took to keep me alive. I walked through that snow until my feet went numb, until I could not feel anything at all. And when I finally fell, when I was ready to let the cold take me, a stranger on a horse appeared out of nowhere. He looked down at me and said something I will never forget. He said a long time ago, somebody should have stopped for me. That man did not just save my life. He gave me a family, a purpose, and the strength to save hundreds of others just like me. But first I had to learn the hardest lesson of all, that I was worth saving. This story is proof that the people who throw you away do not get to decide your worth. It is for anyone who has ever felt like dead weight, like a burden, like they did not matter. Clara's journey reminds us that family is not about blood. It is about who shows up for you when no one else will. If this story touched something deep inside you, leave a comment and tell me who in your life made you feel worth saving. Hit that like button if you believe every child deserves a home, and subscribe so you never miss a story that reminds you just how much you truly matter. Get out! The woman, Agnes Barlow, stared at Clara with empty eyes. The wind howled and bit at Clara's skin as she climbed down from the wagon. The frozen ground felt like 1,000 tiny needles. "But there is nothing out here," Clara pleaded. Agnes's voice was as flat and dead as the frozen fields. "There is not enough food for my own girl. You are just weight." Agnes reached into the wagon and tossed a small, stained bundle into the snow at Clara's feet. "Some bread. It ought to last you a day or two." A day or two. As if that made it right to leave a child to die. "You cannot just leave me," Clara's voice trembled. "I did every single thing you asked of me." Agnes did not even bother to look back at her. "That is the thing about dead weight, girl. It does not matter how hard it tries. It is still just weight." The words hit Clara harder than the biting cold. As the wagon pulled away into the storm, Clara did not scream or run after it. She had learned a long time ago that begging just made things worse. The folks who throw you away do not ever look back. Once the wagon was swallowed by the white, she bent down, her fingers already numb, and picked up the frozen bread. "All right then," she whispered to the wind. "Time to start walking." The snow started coming down harder, a monster trying to swallow her whole. Her feet were long past hurtin'. Now they were just cold and numb, a sure sign the frost was winning. She thought about her papa, Thomas Finch, a good man and a copper miner, gone 3 years now. "You are something special, Clara girl," he used to tell her. "Do not you ever let anyone tell you different." She wasn't so sure about that anymore. The wind screamed and Clara stumbled and fell hard into a drift. For a second she just lay there. The snow felt strangely soft, almost warm. A voice in her head, sounding just like her papa, whispered, "Get up, darling. This is not how your story is supposed to end." "I am tired, Papa." "I know you are, baby. But you got to get up. That is what we Finches do. We get up." With a cry, she pushed herself to her feet. And that is when she heard it. A sound that was not the wind. Hoofbeats, coming right for her. A big chestnut horse appeared out of the blizzard like a phantom, with a giant of a man sitting tall in the saddle. He was weathered and looked as hard as West Texas dirt, but his eyes held a surprising kindness. "Lord Almighty," he breathed out, his voice a low rumble. He swung off that horse faster than you could blink. "Easy now, little one. I'm not going to hurt you." Clara just stood there, frozen to the spot. "Are you all by yourself out here?" She tried to nod her head, but the whole world started spinning. Strong, warm hands caught her just before she hit the ground. They were so warm they almost burned her frozen skin. "Why?" she managed to whisper. "Why did you stop for me?" The man looked down at her, his face full of some old sadness she could not understand. "Because a long time ago," he said softly, "somebody should have stopped for me." He lifted her onto his horse like she was light as a feather, then swung up behind her. His arm was a solid, steady wall around her small frame. "Name's Ezra Thornton," he said. "Got a ranch about 2 miles north of here. You just hold on now." Through the snow, a house appeared. It was not just any house. It was a fortress of stone and timber, with warm, glowing lights in the windows. It was the biggest place Clara had ever seen in her life. "Bessie!" Ezra's voice boomed over the storm as they got closer. The front door flew open, and a woman stood there, her face a mixture of shock and deep concern. "Ezra Thornton, what in the world have you brought home now?" "Found her in the storm, half frozen. Get blankets, get the fire going, now." The warmth inside was so sudden it took her breath away. She gasped, her body suddenly remembering what it felt like to not be freezing. A strong-looking fella named Silas was there in an instant, grabbing thick wool blankets. The woman, Bessie, pressed a warm cup to Clara's lips. "Just small sips, child. That is it." The sweet, hot liquid burned a path back to life inside her. "What is your name, honey?" Bessie asked, her eyes full of worry. "Clara. Clara Finch." Bessie nodded slowly. "Well, Clara Finch, you are safe now. Do you hear me? You are safe. Safe." The word felt strange and foreign on her tongue. "I ain't never been safe before," Clara whispered. A pained look crossed Bessie's face. "You will learn what it means here," she said quietly. Just then, a powerful shiver racked Clara's whole body. "That is good," Silas said from across the room. "That means she's warming up. It means she's going to be just fine." "Why'd you help me?" The question was a bare whisper from Clara's lips. The old rancher, Ezra, just looked at her, his face a road map of hard years. He knelt down, and his voice was as dry and raspy as the winter plains. "I had a daughter once," he began. "Not by blood, but she was mine all the same. Her name was Emma." He told her how his wife, Catherine, had found the girl years ago, half-starved and running from people who should have protected her. He spoke of the awful fever that took them both, Catherine first, and then young Emma just 5 years later, only 16 years old. "She was the brightest light this ranch ever saw," he said, his eyes glassy with old pain. "I couldn't save either one of them. But when I saw you out there in that snow, I reckoned maybe, just maybe, I could save you." Clara stared, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "But, mister, I ain't nobody special," she insisted. Ezra's voice turned fierce. "You're a child," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And that makes you the most important soul there is." With those words, something inside Clara finally gave way. The tears she had locked away for 3 long years, ever since her papa passed and the world went cold, came flooding out. She cried for the hunger, the loneliness, and the bitter cold of being unwanted. Bessie, the housekeeper, was right there in an instant, wrapping strong arms around the trembling girl. "You go on and let it all out, honey," she soothed. "You've been carrying that heavy load by your lonesome for far too long." And Clara did. She cried until she felt empty, held tight by these strangers who already felt more like family than anyone she'd ever known. When the tears finally stopped, she felt a strange new lightness, as if a great weight had been lifted from her small shoulders. Bessie got her cleaned up and sat her down at a huge wooden table in the kitchen. It was warm from the cook stove, and a plate piled high with roasted chicken and fresh bread appeared before her. Clara couldn't help but notice the 6 empty chairs, all pushed in neat and tidy. "This is a mighty big table for just 3 folks," she said quietly. Bessie offered a small, sad smile. "It used to be fuller. We're hoping it might be again someday." From across the table, Ezra watched her with a serious expression. "You are not the first child I've pulled out of a storm," he said. "And I have a feeling you will not be the last." He told her that in this valley, when times got hard, some folks treated their children like they were disposable. "I've got more room in this house than one old man could ever need," he said, his gaze sweeping over the empty chairs. "It seems to me a place this big ought to be used for something good." Clara looked down at the amazing food on her plate. "I do not know if I know how to stay," she whispered. "That is perfectly all right." Ezra's voice was gentle as a summer breeze. "You take all the time you need. Nobody is rushing you." Clara took a bite of the warm, buttery bread. The simple, honest taste of it was so good that it made her eyes well up with fresh tears all over again. After she had eaten her fill, Bessie showed her to a room upstairs. It was a real room with a sturdy bed, a thick mattress, and a window that looked out over the quiet valley. "This is yours," Bessie said softly, "for as long as you need it." As Clara took it all in, she had to ask about all the empty rooms and the chairs downstairs. "What happened to everyone who used to be here?" Bessie was quiet for a moment. "Life happened," she said finally, a deep sadness in her voice. "Loss has a way of emptying a house. But Ezra, he believes you can fill it back up. He thinks if you open your door wide enough, the world gives something back." Then Bessie left, closing the door gently. Clara stood alone in the quiet, and for the first time in years, she felt completely safe. The next morning, Clara woke to the wonderful smell of bacon and coffee. Down in the kitchen, she found Ezra and Silas at the table while Bessie worked at the stove. After they ate, Bessie had her help dry the dishes. Clara found the courage to ask if Bessie had ever had a family of her own. Bessie did not hesitate. She told Clara about losing her husband in the war, and then all three of her children to cholera a year later. "Ezra found me after all that," she said, her voice steady and strong. "He did not save me, child. He gave me a chance to save myself, and that is exactly what he is giving you." Bessie turned from the sink and looked right into Clara's eyes. "I have seen what hurt does to children. Most times it makes them hard, but you are not hard. You are careful. You are just trying to figure out if all this is real. That is not weakness, honey. That is wisdom." And in that moment, Clara believed she might just be wise enough and strong enough to finally have a home. Clara woke up to the smell of bacon frying. In the kitchen, Bessie stood at the stove while Silas nodded from the table. "Well, look who's up," Silas said. We figured you'd be asleep till the bluebonnets bloomed." Clara just stood there, stuck in the doorway. "Go on and sit," Bessie said without turning. "Food's about ready. You need your strength." Clara took a seat. Ezra looked at her over his coffee mug. "How you feeling?" he asked. Her voice was raspy. "Sore, but I'm all right." "Sore is to be expected," he said. "Walking through a blizzard barefoot, I'm surprised you got any toes left." Clara glanced at her new boots. "Haven't rightly checked yet." Silas let out a big, warm laugh. "She's got some grit, boss." "That's what kept her alive," Ezra said. "Grit. Same thing that kept our Emma going." That name, Emma, just hung in the air between them. "Are you always going to compare me to her?" Clara asked, her words sharper than she intended. Ezra's gaze was steady. "Nope, you're not Emma. You're Clara. And you've got your own story to write." Bessie put a heaping plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. "Eat," she ordered. Clara ate like she hadn't seen food in a month. When the plate was clean, Bessie filled it again without a word, and she ate that too. When she finally stopped, all three of them were watching her. "Sorry," she mumbled. "Don't you apologize for being hungry," Bessie grunted. "That ain't a crime." Ezra leaned back. "I meant what I said last night, Clara. There's a home for you here if you want it, no strings attached." "Why?" she asked again, looking him square in the eye. "In my experience, folks don't do something for nothing." "Then you've been dealing with the wrong kind of folks," he replied gently. "Maybe so, but that don't make you different." Silas whistled low. "She's putting you to the test, boss." "And she's right to," Ezra said, his eyes still on Clara. Trust ain't a gift, it's earned, so I'll earn it. One day at a time. You can take as long as you need to decide if I'm worth it. Clara just stared, a tightness in her chest. And if I decide you ain't? Then you ride on out. No hard feelings. I'll give you supplies and enough cash to get you to the next town. He shrugged. It's your life, Clara. Life. Your choice. Always. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. I don't know what to do with that, she admitted quietly. That's all right, you'll figure it out. Bessie started to clear the plates. Enough talk for now. Actually, Ezra said, holding up a hand, there is one more thing. A look passed between him and Bessie that Clara couldn't understand. You sure? Bessie asked him low. I'm sure, he said, standing up. Come with me, Clara. He led her down a hallway she hadn't noticed before. The house was bigger than she thought. He stopped at a door at the far end of the hall. What I'm about to show you, he said, his voice serious. It isn't easy to see, but you need to understand what this place is about. Clara's heart started to pound. Ezra opened the door. It was a simple room with a bed, a dresser, and a window looking out at the snow. But the walls were covered in drawings. Dozens of them, all done by a child. There were pictures of horses, mountains, and a house that looked just like this one. In the corner of every single one was a name. Emma. This was her room, Ezra said, his voice thick with emotion. I haven't changed a thing. I come in here sometimes to remember why I keep going. Clara stepped inside, her fingers gently touching a drawing of a smiling girl. She was talented, Clara whispered. She was good at everything, Ezra said with a sad smile. She came to us just like you, Clara, broken, running from people who should have loved her. My wife, Catherine, she saw the goodness in Emma. She loved that girl right back to life. He paused. Then a fever took them both. First Catherine, then Emma, a year later. It was like she couldn't stand the world without her mama. I'm sorry, Clara said, her own eyes burning. Don't be sorry. Be something else. Ezra picked up a small, carved wooden horse from the dresser, the one she had seen before. Emma always said sorry don't fix fences, but doing something does. He held the horse out to her. I want you to have this. I can't, she breathed. It was hers. It was, and now it's yours. I think she would have wanted someone who needed it to have it. Clara took the little horse. It felt smooth and worn with love. Thank you, she whispered. I'm showing you this room for a reason, Ezra went on. This house, it's too quiet, too empty for one old man. He looked at his daughter's drawings. Catherine always wanted to fill it with children who needed a home, to build something good in all this space. Clara held her breath. After they passed, I couldn't do it. It hurt too much. Felt like I was betraying their memory. He turned to face her fully. But then I found you out there in the snow, half gone but still fighting. And I thought maybe this is a sign. Maybe it's time. The wooden horse felt heavy in her hand. I am not asking you to be Emma, Ezra said plainly. I'm not asking you to fill her shoes. What I'm asking is, will you help me? Help me build what Catherine dreamed of. Help you how? She asked. By staying, he said. By healing. By being the first. His eyes were full of a desperate hope. And maybe down the road by helping me find the others. Others? There's more kids out there, Clara. Just like you and Emma. Thrown away and forgotten. I can't save 'em all. His jaw tightened. But I can save some. And that has to count for something. Clara looked from the drawings to the little horse in her hand. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You walked through a blizzard with no shoes. That's a special kind of strong. That was just surviving, she argued. And what do you think this is? He asked gently. Surviving, Clara. Day after day. Getting up when you'd rather stay down. That's all any of us are really doing. She was quiet for a long time. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need, he said, heading for the door. This room is yours if you want it. Your choice. He left her there, alone with the ghosts of a family, holding a little wooden horse in her hand. The days started to drift by. Clara learned the rhythms of the ranch. Bessie ran the house with an iron fist. She was tough as nails, all sharp words and stern looks. But Clara saw things. She saw Bessie slip extra biscuits onto plates and hum old hymns when she worked. She saw that Bessie always knew when someone needed a kind word, even if it came out sounding like an order. You gonna stand in that doorway all day, or are you gonna help with these dishes? Clara jumped. Sorry, I'll help. Don't need your sorries, I need your hands. They worked without talking for a bit, just the sound of plates and water. Bessie? Clara asked. How long have you been here? Bessie's hands stopped moving in the soapy water. Going on 20 years now. That's a long time. Longer than I've been anywhere else, Bessie said. Clara stacked a dry plate. Did you have family before? The silence stretched out between them. Clara feared she had gone too far. Bessie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I did. A husband and 3 children. Lost my husband in the war. Then I lost all 3 of my babies to cholera the next year. They were all gone inside of a week. Clara felt a tightness in her chest. I am so sorry. It was a long time ago, Bessie said, handing her a plate. That kind of hurt never goes away. But it does get quieter. She explained how Ezra found her in a saloon, scrubbing floors and barely surviving. He offered her a job and a place to live. So he saved you too, Clara whispered. Bessie looked straight at her. He did not save me, child. He gave me a chance to stand up. The saving part, she tapped her own heart. I had to do that myself, just like you will. Bessie saw the look on Clara's face. You are doing better than you know, she said gently. I have seen a lot of hurt children. For most, that hurt turns them hard and mean. But you are not hard. You are just scared and careful. That is not weakness, Clara. That is wisdom. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. I just feel like I'm drowning. Well, that is what wisdom feels like sometimes. The foolish ones never feel it. They just sink to the bottom and never even know they ran out of air. A small laugh escaped Clara's lips before she could stop it. Bessie's face broke into a real smile, and it changed everything about her. There it is, she said. A little bit of light. She handed Clara the last plate. You are going to be all right, Clara Finch. It might take some time, but you will be. Clara wanted to believe her more than anything. How can you know that? Because I have been right where you are, Bessie said, and I am still standing here. In the next 2 weeks, Clara's feet healed and the nightmares began to fade. She started to learn. Silas taught her about the horses, talking to them with a gentle patience. This here is Bella, he said one morning in the barn. Clara nodded, remembering the chestnut mare that carried her through the snowstorm. She is the boss's favorite, Silas explained, stroking Bella's neck. She is a good judge of character. She knows who to trust. What does she think of me? Clara asked. Silas grinned. She let you on her back in a blizzard. For Bella, that is the highest praise there is. Clara reached out a hand and touched the mare's soft nose. Bella nickered and pushed right back into her palm. You want to learn to ride the right way? Silas asked. Clara's heart jumped. Can I? Sure you can. The boss says you can do what you want, long as you do not get hurt. I have never really ridden before. Then we will start at the beginning, Silas said with a twinkle in his eye. By springtime, you will ride like you were born to it. Clara spent the next week learning everything about Bella, from brushing her coat to reading the flick of her ear. and then she learned to ride. "Heels down," Silas called as she circled the corral. "Relax your shoulders, you are as stiff as a board." "I am trying not to fall off." "You will not fall. Bella will not let you. Just trust her." Clara took a deep breath and let her shoulders drop. The fear did not vanish, but it made room for something new. She could feel the wind in her hair and the strong horse moving beneath her, with nothing but open sky above. "There you go!" Silas was grinning when she finally brought Bella to a stop. "See? You are a natural." "I am not a natural. I am just stubborn." "With horses, that is about the same thing," he laughed. Clara patted Bella's neck. "Silas, thank you for this." "No need for thanks. It is easy to teach someone who wants to learn." He paused. "Besides, the boss told me to keep an eye on you." "And what will you tell him?" Silas looked at her for a long moment. "I am going to tell him you are going to be just fine." Clara was almost starting to believe him, and that was the most frightening feeling of all. The stranger arrived during her third week. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the frantic sound of hoofbeats. Ezra was already on the porch, and Silas came from the barn holding a rifle. "Easy now," Ezra called out. A man on a tired, sweating horse rode up and nearly collapsed. "Mr. Thornton, thank God I found you." "Take it easy, Jacob. What has happened?" "It is the Henderson place," the man said, his voice shaking. "A fire. It all went up last night. Tom and his wife are gone, the children too." Clara's blood ran cold. "The children?" "Two of them," Jacob cried. "A boy and a girl. They got out and were hiding in the barn. They have got nobody left, Mr. Thornton. I did not know where else to take them." Ezra's face was like stone. "Where are they?" "In my wagon, just down the road. I did not want to bring them up here without asking." Ezra's voice was flat and final. "Bring them now." He turned and his eyes met Clara's through the window. He did not look away as he called out, "Bessie, get 2 more beds ready. We have got company." Clara's heart pounded. 2 more lost children. "Are you ready for this?" Ezra asked her quietly. She thought of the big empty table. "No," she said, "but I do not think it matters." A flicker of understanding crossed Ezra's face. "No," he agreed, "it does not." Jacob pulled that wagon in, his face all shades of tired. Huddled in the back were 2 little ones under a thin blanket looking like lost calves. The boy, maybe 12 years old, had a jaw set so hard you could tell he was fighting something fierce inside. A little girl, about 8, was holding onto his arm for dear life. From the porch, Clara watched Ezra walk over to them, slow and easy. "Howdy," Ezra said, his voice soft. "My name's Ezra. This here is my ranch, and y'all are safe now." The boy just stared, his eyes holding sights no child ought to see. The little girl, she started to cry. "Hush now, Ruby," the boy whispered, pulling her in tighter. Ezra asked the boy his name. "Jonas," he said, his voice rough. "Jonas Whitmore. This is my sister, Ruby May." He looked Ezra square in the eye. "You ain't one of Henderson's men." "No, sir, I am not." Jonas's jaw clenched. "They took us in after Mama passed. Said we could have a home if we worked for it." A familiar ache spread through Clara's chest. She knew that kind of deal all too well. "Well, Jonas," Ezra said, holding out a hand, "you don't have to work for a home here. You just have to want one." Jonas just looked at that hand. "That's what the Hendersons said, too." Ezra's voice was steady. "I ain't the Hendersons." "How am I supposed to know that?" Clara was moving before she even thought to. She came down the steps and stood right there beside Ezra. "You don't," she said, her voice clear. "You don't know a thing about this place. You got no reason at all to trust any of us." Jonas looked at her, his eyes full of suspicion. "Who are you?" "My name is Clara. I showed up here 3 weeks ago, half dead in a blizzard." She held up her hands, showing him the faint scars where the cold had split her skin open. "I know exactly how you're feeling. It seems impossible that this could be real, that someone would just want to help you for no reason." Jonas stayed quiet, but she saw a little crack appear in that wall he had built around himself. "I won't lie to you," Clara went on. "I'm still not sure if I trust all this myself, but I know one thing for certain." "What's that?" Clara glanced at little Ruby May, who had stopped crying and was just watching. "Your sister is cold, she's scared, and she's powerful, hungry. Whatever this place ends up being, it is a whole lot warmer than that wagon." She took a step back. "So maybe y'all come inside, get some food in her belly, and we can figure out the trust part later on." Jonas looked at her, then down at his sister. "You hungry, Ruby May?" The little girl gave a small nod. A long breath went out of Jonas, like a rope that had been stretched too tight had finally gone slack. "All right," he said, standing and lifting Ruby into his arms. "All right, we'll come inside." This time, when Ezra reached up to help, Jonas took his hand. Clara watched them head for the house, where Bessie was already holding the door open, promising hot stew and warm beds. Ezra came and stood next to Clara. "That was a good thing you did," he said quietly. "What you said to him." "I just told him the truth." "That's why it was good," Ezra replied, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "You understand them. You know what they're feeling and what they need to hear." Clara just shrugged. "I understand being scared, that's all it is." "That's a lot," Ezra said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes that's everything." They stood there watching the sun dip low behind the mountains. "This is what you meant," Clara said after a moment. "About building something here. This is it, isn't it? How many more are out there?" "Too many." Ezra's voice was heavy. "More than one ranch can hold, but we have to try anyway." "Yeah," she said softly. "We try anyway." Clara thought about Jonas and Ruby May, and the fire that had stolen everything from them. She thought about her own journey through the snow, with nothing but frozen bread in her pocket. "I want to help," she said, the words tumbling out. "I want to help you save them." Ezra was quiet for a second. "You sure about that?" "No," Clara shook her head. "I ain't sure about a single thing. But I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of just getting by. I want to do something that matters." She looked right at him. "I want to be something that matters." A softness came over Ezra's face. "You already are, Clara. You just don't see it yet." He turned and walked back to the house. She stood in the fading light, watching him go. 3 weeks ago, she was nothing, dying in the snow. Now she was standing on her own 2 feet, making her own choices. And deep inside, a little seed of hope was starting to grow. Real hope. Clara took a deep breath, let it out slow, and followed him inside. Jonas didn't trust anybody, that was plain as day. At dinner, he kept one arm around Ruby May, his eyes tracking every move at the table. His own plate of food sat cold while he made sure his sister ate her fill. Clara knew that look. She had worn it herself not long ago. "You don't have to guard her from the potatoes," Silas said with a gentle smile. "They ain't gonna bite." Jonas's jaw just got tighter. "I ain't hungry." "You're lying," Clara said plainly. "You're starving. I can see it on your face, but you won't take a bite until you're certain she's safe." Jonas turned his hard gaze on her. "How would you know?" "Because I did the exact same thing my first night here. I kept waiting for someone to snatch my plate away, tell me I hadn't earned the food." Ruby May looked up. "Did they take it away from you?" "No," Clara shook her head. "They let me eat till I was full, and then they offered me more." The little girl's eyes grew wide. She looked from Bessie to Ezra and back to Clara. "Is that true, mister?" she asked Ezra. "You'll let us eat all we want?" "Every last bite," Ezra's voice was gentle. "As long as y'all are under my roof, you will not go hungry. That is a promise." Ruby May tugged on her brother's sleeve. "Jonas, he promised." "Promises don't mean a thing, Ruby," Jonas said, his voice bitter. "Then watch what we do," Ezra said, meeting the boy's stare. "Ignore the words. Just watch our actions. You can decide for yourself if we're worth trusting." Jonas stared at him for a long, hard moment. Something shifted in his eyes. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a start. He picked up his fork and began to eat. Clara let out a breath she hadn't even realized she was holding. Later that night, she found Jonas standing outside a room looking at drawings tacked to the walls. "Who was she?" he asked as Clara came up beside him. "Her name was Emma," Clara said softly. "She was Ezra's daughter. Not by blood, but she was his." "What happened to her?" "A fever, about 5 years ago." Jonas was quiet. "He just keeps her room like this?" "Yeah, I think it helps him remember why he does all this, why he takes in kids like us." Jonas turned to her, looking much older than 12 in the dim light. "The Hendersons," he said quietly. "They weren't bad people. They worked us hard, but they fed us." He trailed off. "I thought maybe they'd start to love us." "Yeah," his voice cracked. "Stupid, ain't it?" "No," Clara's chest ached for him. "Not stupid. It's human." He swallowed hard. "They died. In a fire. And all I could think about while I watched it burn was that I was glad Ruby May wasn't in there. That's all, not sad for them. Not sad for... Just glad my sister was safe." "That ain't wrong, Jonas." "It feels wrong." Clara put a hand on his arm. He flinched, but let her hand stay. "You protected her. That is what matters. All that other stuff, the guilt and the mess in your head, that's just noise. The truth is simple. You kept your sister alive." Tears welled in his eyes. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "How to stop fighting all the time." "I know," Clara squeezed his arm. "I don't either. But maybe we can figure it out together." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his face finally softened. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe we can." The days melted into weeks. Winter kept its cold grip on the valley, but inside that ranch house, things were starting to thaw. Jonas started helping Silas in the barn. At first he was tense, always expecting a harsh word for any mistake. But Silas was a patient man. He showed Jonas how to care for the horses, how to mend tack. "You got good hands," Silas told him one afternoon. "Horses like a steady, calm hand." Jonas ducked his head. "My pa was a horseman before he took off." Silas was quiet for a moment. "A man who walks out on his own children ain't no man at all," he said. "That failure is on him, son, not on you." Jonas didn't say anything back, but Clara saw him stand a little bit taller after that. "Sure you do," Clara teased. "You fixed her apron, braided her hair, and saved her the biggest biscuit this morning." Bessie sighed, her hands stopping their work. "She reminds me of my youngest, Sarah. She had the same eyes, always looking at the world like it was full of magic." Clara's heart ached. "I am sorry about your children." "That was a long time ago," Bessie said, kneading the dough again. "You cannot change what is past. You can only try to build a better future. That is what this place is all about, you know. Me, Ezra, Silas, we all lost pieces of ourselves. But instead of letting that break us, we decided to build something new here." It was a cold, gray morning in February when the next one arrived. Clara was in the barn with Jonas, mucking out stalls, when she heard Silas holler. His voice was sharp with urgency. "Boss, we got trouble!" They ran to the gate to find Silas holding a small, limp body in his arms. "Found him in the south pasture," Silas said, his breath fogging in the air. "Half buried in a snowdrift." Clara's heart sank. The boy couldn't have been more than 11 years old, his lips blue and his clothes little more than rags against the cold. "Get him inside," Ezra's voice was tight with command. "Now!" Inside the kitchen, they worked with a quiet purpose. Ezra stripped off the boy's wet clothes, his hands moving fast. "Silas, get the copper tub," he ordered. "We need to warm him up slow. Too fast and his heart'll give out for good." Clara knelt beside the boy, watching the shallow, uneven movement of his chest. He was breathing. That was something. "Hey," she whispered. "Can you hear me? You're safe now." His eyelids fluttered, but no sound came out. They worked through the night, slowly bringing him back from the edge. By morning, color had returned to his cheeks, and when Clara checked on him, his dark eyes were open. They were filled with a fear so deep it made her own chest hurt. "You're at Thornton Creek Ranch," she told him gently. "You're safe here. Nobody's gonna hurt you." He just stared, not saying a word. "It's all right if you can't talk," she said. "Sometimes after a real bad spell, the words get stuck." "I understand that." Something flickered in his eyes, maybe surprise. "My name's Clara," she said. "Not too long ago, I was just like you, alone and scared." She held up her hands, showing him the old frostbite scars on her palms. "This hurt something awful while it was healing, but it healed, and you will too." His eyes went from her scars to her face. "Samuel," he breathed, the word rusty and quiet. "My name's Samuel." His face twisted with a painful memory. "That was my pa's name. They hung him 3 months ago for being a horse thief." Clara's stomach tightened. "Was he?" "Yeah." Samuel's voice was bitter. "But he was still my pa. Afterward, nobody wanted me. Said I was bad blood. Said I'd end up just like him." He looked away. "Maybe they're right." Clara waited until he looked back at her. "Let me tell you something, Samuel Prescott. I don't care who your pa was. You ain't him. You are you, and you get to choose the man you're gonna be." "That's easy for you to say." "No," Clara leaned in. "It ain't easy at all. It's the hardest thing in the world, deciding to be different from what everyone says you are, but it's possible. I know because I'm doing it." Samuel stared at her, and beneath the fear in his eyes, she saw a tiny spark of hope. "You really think I could be different?" he whispered. "I think you already are." Clara stood up. "You survived, Samuel. You made it here. That took a kind of strength that tells me everything I need to know." As she got to the door, he called out, "Clara?" His voice cracked. "Thank you for not looking at me like I'm something dirty." Her heart ached for him. "You ain't dirty, Samuel. You're just a kid who's been through hell." That night, as she passed his room, she heard him crying, the real, shuddering sobs of someone who finally felt safe enough to break. She knocked softly, and when he whispered for her to come in, she found him sitting up in bed, his face wet with tears. She just sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet. "I keep seeing it," he finally whispered. "The rope, the way he looked." His voice trailed off. "How do you make the pictures in your head stop?" "You don't." "Not really," Clara said honestly, thinking of her own nightmares. "But they get quieter. Takes time." "How much time?" "It's different for everyone," she said, squeezing his arm. "But you don't have to do it alone. That's the thing about this place. Nobody here is alone." His eyes were red-rimmed and tired. "You really believe that?" "I'm starting to," she smiled softly. "Ask me again in a few months." A small sound, almost a laugh, escaped him. "You're strange, Clara Finch." "I know," she said, standing up. "Get some sleep, Samuel. Tomorrow's a new day." As she reached the door, he spoke again. "Clara, I'm glad Silas found me." Clara felt tears in her own eyes. "Me too, Samuel. Me too." Spring came slowly, melting away the snow and bringing the ranch back to life. The big house, once so quiet, was now full of noise. 4 children, 4 broken lives, all mending together. One evening, Ezra came to stand beside her on the porch. "You did this," he said. Brought them all together. I didn't do anything, she shook her head. You took them in. I gave them a roof, Ezra corrected her. You, Clara. You gave them hope. You showed them what was possible. It felt like too much to carry. I just told them the truth, she finally said, about being scared and alone, and thinking you are not worth anything. Ezra's voice was gentle. That is it right there. You understand them. You speak their language, and that is worth more than any roof or meal. He put a hand on her shoulder. My Catherine always said the same thing. She said the best way to help someone heal is to show them they are not alone. Clara's voice was just a whisper. She did? Ezra looked off, lost in a memory. She had a gift for seeing the broken places in people and moving toward them, not away. She made them feel seen. He looked right at Clara. You have got that same gift, Clara. I have seen you use it with Jonas, with Ruby May, with Samuel. You really see them, and that changes everything. Clara felt hot tears in her eyes. I do not feel gifted, she whispered. I just feel like I'm making it up as I go. Ezra smiled. That is how the best people feel. The ones who think they have it all figured out, they are the dangerous ones. You are changing this world, Clara, one child at a time. And for the first time, her tears were not from grief or fear. They felt like belonging, like home. The rider appeared at dusk, a dark figure pushing his horse hard through the spring mud. Silas, Clara called from the barn. Someone is coming. By the time he reached the yard, Ezra was on the porch, his face set like stone. Clara knew that look. It meant trouble. Mr. Thornton, the rider said, breathing hard. Got a message from town. Sheriff Dalton says you need to come on in. Says there has been some talk. What kind of talk? Ezra asked. About the children? The rider's eyes darted toward Clara. Folks are asking questions. Where they came from. If you have got the right to keep them. Clara's blood ran cold. Ezra's face did not change. I have got every right. They are under my protection. It is not me you have to convince, the rider said, shifting in his saddle. Sheriff just said you should come sooner rather than later. Ezra watched him ride off. What does that mean? Clara asked, her voice small. It means someone has been stirring up trouble, Ezra said. And I have got a pretty good idea who. Who is it? Clara asked. Virgil Crawford, Ezra said, his jaw tight. His family has been fighting mine for 30 years over that south pasture. He cannot beat me fair and square, so he's trying to come at me sideways, through the children. He walked down the porch steps. He is probably telling folks I am collecting orphans for free labor or something else to get the law involved. Clara felt a knot in her stomach. But that is not true. You are not like that. I know it, and you know it. But folks in town see a rich rancher suddenly filling his house with homeless children. It looks suspicious if you want it to. So what do we do? She asked. We ride to town. We answer their questions, Ezra said, looking her straight in the eye. We show them who these children really are. Are you up for that? Clara thought of the little family they were building. Yes, she said, her voice firm. I am up for that. The town of Copper Hollow was a small cluster of buildings that served the ranchers and miners in the valley. Clara rode beside Ezra on Bella, her back straight. Jonas rode behind them, his face as serious as Ezra's. They had left Samuel and Ruby May back at the ranch with Bessie and Silas, to shield them from what was coming. As they neared the town, Ezra spoke low. Remember, do not let them see you are scared. People can smell fear like a dog smells blood. You show weakness, and they will tear you apart. I am not scared, Clara lied. The sheriff's office was at the end of the main street. Sheriff Dalton, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, stood outside. Next to him was a tall, broad man with a face like a block of granite. That is Crawford, Ezra muttered. Stay calm." They dismounted and walked toward the men. "Sheriff Dalton," Ezra said, his voice level. "Appreciate you coming in, Ezra." The sheriff nodded. Virgil Crawford spoke, his voice slick as oil. "Just a concerned citizen, Ezra. Been hearing some disturbing things about your operation out there." "It is not an operation. It is a ranch," Ezra said. "A ranch full of orphans," Crawford shot back with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Curious thing, a man your age with no wife or kids of his own suddenly taking in strays." "What I do on my own land is my business," Ezra replied. "Is it?" Crawford said. "Do these children have families looking for them, or did you just collect them like stray dogs?" Clara felt Jonas tense up beside her and put a steadying hand on his arm. "Every child in my house was abandoned," Ezra said flatly. "Left to die. I gave them a home." "That is your version of the story," Crawford said, turning to the sheriff. "I have heard you might be working these kids, using them for cheap labor, or maybe worse." "That is a lie." The words flew out of Clara before she could stop them. Crawford turned, his eyes sweeping over her with contempt. "And who are you?" "I am Clara Finch," she said, stepping forward, her heart hammering in her chest. "I was the first one. Mr. Thornton found me half dead in a blizzard 3 months ago. He did not have to help me, but he did." "A touching story," Crawford sneered. "But touching stories often cover up something ugly." "You want to see ugly?" Clara's voice rose, clear and strong. "I will show you the scars on my feet from walking in the snow with no shoes. I will show you the marks on my hands from frostbite. That is what people like you protect, people who throw children away like they are garbage." "Clara," Ezra said, his tone a warning. "No," she shook her head. "I will not stand here and let him twist this into something dirty. I know what Mr. Thornton has done for me and for all of us. And I will not let some bitter old man with a grudge tear it all apart." The street had gone silent. People were watching from their doorways. "Let them look," she thought. "Let them see the truth." Sheriff Dalton cleared his throat. "That young lady has got some spirit." "Spirit does not make her honest," Crawford snapped. "Maybe not," the sheriff said, his voice thoughtful. "But I have known Ezra Thornton for 20 years, and I have never known him to be anything but a decent man. I cannot say the same for everyone in this valley." Crawford's face darkened. "Are you taking his side?" "I'm not taking any side. I am doing my job," Dalton said, looking at Ezra. "Have you got papers? Something to prove these children do not have family claiming them?" "I have records for every child," Ezra said calmly. "You are welcome to see them any time." "I would like that," Dalton nodded. "Bring them by my office tomorrow. We will go through it all." "And until then," Crawford demanded. "Until then," the sheriff's voice turned to steel, "I suggest you go on home and mind your own business, Virgil. Unless you have actual proof of some wrongdoing, you're just wasting my time." For a moment, Crawford looked like he might explode. Then his face changed, a cold calculation settling in his eyes. They rode back from town in a heavy silence. Clara's hands were still shaking from the confrontation. "You shouldn't have done that," Ezra finally said. "Spoken up to Crawford like that. He's a dangerous man." "He was lying about you," she answered, her voice steady. "I couldn't just stand there." "Sometimes the smart thing to do is keep your head down and let the storm pass," he said. "Is that what you do?" she challenged. He paused. "It's what I've had to do for 30 years. But I'll admit, watching you stand up to him, that was something." "What's he really after?" Clara asked. "The South pasture, for one," Ezra said, his voice tired. "I won that land from his father in a card game 30 years ago. But it's more than that. He wants to break me, and these children are just his latest weapon." "So what do?" "We do what we've always done," Ezra said, his jaw set. "We keep our heads up. We take care of our own. And we don't let men like Virgil Crawford dictate how we live our lives." They got back to the ranch as the sun was going down. Bessie was waiting on the porch, her face lined with worry. "Crawford is making trouble," Ezra said, "but the sheriff is a fair man. The children are safe for now." Ezra went inside to get some papers for the sheriff. Clara stayed out on the porch with Jonas. "You were brave today," Jonas said quietly, "standing up to that man." "I did not feel brave. I just felt scared." "That is what being brave is," Jonas told her. "Doing something even when you are scared." Clara thought about that. "Jonas, do you think we are really safe here?" He was quiet for a second. "I think we are safer here than anywhere else. And I think that man inside would die before he let anyone hurt us." "That is what I'm afraid of," Clara whispered, "that he will get hurt trying to protect us." Jonas's jaw hardened. "Then we protect him back. That is what family does." The word still felt strange, but it was starting to feel right. That man, Crawford, was poisoning the whole town against Ezra, and the lie was starting to feel like the truth. The tension on the ranch was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ezra had gone to the sheriff and laid out his records, but Crawford just kept on whispering his poison. You could see the fight was wearing Ezra down. It etched new lines around his eyes and put a hitch in his step. One evening, Bessie laid it out plain. "You need help, Ezra. You cannot fight this man by yourself. You need folks in town to stand up for you." Ezra just shook his head. "Who is going to do that? I have always kept to myself." "Maybe that was the mistake," Bessie said, her voice soft but sure. Ezra looked over at Clara. "You made some friends in town," he said. "I only made enemies." Clara gave a small shrug. "Maybe you made some friends, too. Maybe we ought to stop hiding out here and show folks what this ranch is really all about." The answer came from little Ruby May over breakfast. "Why do we not just invite them all out here?" she asked. "Let them see it for themselves." The whole table went quiet. "Mama used to say it is hard to hate someone after you have eaten their cooking." A laugh escaped Bessie. "That child has a point." Ezra looked at Ruby May with a newfound respect. "An open house. We will let people come see the ranch and meet the children. We will show them we have nothing to hide." Jonah worried. "Crawford will just use it against us." Clara felt a fire light in her chest. "He is going to do that anyway. At least this way, we are the ones telling the story." Ezra nodded, a slow, sure thing. "All right, let us do it." They spent weeks getting ready. Bessie filled the kitchen with the smell of baking bread, while Silas and the others made the ranch shine. The night before, Clara gathered the children. "Just be yourselves," she told them. "That is more than enough." "What if they ask about my paw?" Samuel asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You tell them what you want to tell them," Clara said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "No one can make you say more than you are ready to." On the day of the open house, wagons started rolling up the drive. Clara stood on the porch, her heart pounding a drum against her ribs. Ezra stood beside her, as calm as a summer morning. "Ready?" he asked. "No," Clara breathed out, "but I am fixin' to do it anyway." He smiled. "That is my girl." The first to arrive was a young couple, looking nervous. "Welcome," Clara said, stepping forward. "I am Clara. Can I show you all around?" The woman's face softened with relief. "That would be lovely. I am Sarah." Clara showed them the warm kitchen, the parlor where Ruby May played the piano with more heart than skill, and the barn where Jonas was showing off the horses. "This place is wonderful," Sarah said. "I heard such awful rumors, but this is a home." "That is what it is," Clara said, a lump forming in her throat. "A home for folks who needed one." All day, Clara told her own story. She watched faces change from suspicion to something like understanding. One woman listened, wide-eyed. "You walked through a blizzard with no shoes?" Clara held up her scarred hands. "And that man just took you in?" "Just like that," Clara said, looking toward Ezra. He did not ask for a thing. He just gave me a place to be. The woman reached out and squeezed Clara's hand. God bless him, she whispered. And God bless you, child. Crawford showed up late in the day, his face a thundercloud. But Ezra met him at the gate, hand outstretched. Virgil, I'm glad you could make it. Crawford looked at the hand like it was a rattlesnake. You think this party changes anything? It gives you a chance to see the truth, Ezra said calmly. Come on inside, meet the children. Curiosity, or maybe something else, won out, and Crawford swung down from his horse. Ezra led him through the house. Crawford was silent, but his eyes missed nothing. In the parlor, Ruby May was picking out a tune on the piano. Who is this? Crawford asked. That is Ruby May Collins, Ezra said softly. She came to us a few months back. Her foster family. They passed on in a fire. Crawford stared at the little girl. A flicker of something that looked a whole lot like pain crossed his face. She has her mother's hands, he muttered. You knew her mother? I knew the Hendersons, Crawford said, his voice gone rough. Knew they took in strays. He turned to leave. This does not change anything between us, he called back. But I will leave the children out of it. It is not their fight. And then he was gone. As the last of the guests drove off, the family gathered on the porch, tired but feeling victorious. We did it, Ruby May chirped. We surely did, Ezra said, a real smile finally reaching his eyes. I am proud of every last one of you. Clara looked at the faces around her. This strange and beautiful family of broken pieces that had become whole. Thank you, she said quietly to Ezra. For what? For stopping for me in that storm. For seeing me. For building all of this. I did not build it alone, Ezra's voice was thick with feeling. We built it together. That is what family means. He put his arm around her shoulders. Building something together that is stronger than any one of us alone. Clara leaned against him, and for the first time the word family did not feel like a lie. It felt like the gods' honest truth. 3 more children found their way to the ranch that summer. First came Lily Grace, 7 years old, found wandering down the main road with no memory of how she got there. Clara held her through the nightmares. Then came Tobias Jenkins, who was 9. His people would not claim him, and he showed up asking to work for his keep. You do not work for food here, Ezra told the boy. You just get to eat. Finally, a boy named Toby stared at him like he did not understand the words. Then, on a blistering August afternoon, another wagon rolled up the long drive. A rickety wagon pulled up, and inside was a boy who stole the breath right out of Clara's lungs. They told her he was gone, a lie she had carried for years. Yet there he was. The boy in that wagon had her father's eyes and his stubborn chin, the same one she saw in her own reflection. William. The name was a whisper on her lips. The boy looked up, all of 6 years old, skinny and scared to death. Clara? His little voice trembled. Is that really you? She flew off that porch, her feet barely touching the ground as she crossed the yard. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him so tight she could feel his tiny heart hammering against her. Will, oh, Will, I thought you were gone. They told me you were gone. He started to cry, his small frame shaking in her arms. They said the same thing about you. The nun said I would never see you again. I am right here, Clara said, pulling back to cup his face in her hands. I am not going anywhere. The man who brought him, a preacher with kind eyes, climbed down. Are you Clara Finch? He asked. This boy has been asking for you for 3 long years. The old orphanage records finally led me to you. Clara's mind was spinning. Her baby brother was alive. Ezra came and stood beside her, his eyes moving from Will to Clara, and he understood everything. This must be the brother you told me about. Clara just nodded, unable to find her voice. Well now, Ezra said, crouching down to Will's level. Welcome home, William. We have been waiting on you. That evening, Clara sat on the edge of Will's bed, just watching him sleep, hardly believing he was real. You are staring, Will mumbled, his eyes half closed. I know, she whispered. I cannot help it. Why? Because I missed you so much, it felt like a part of me was gone. Clara's voice broke. Will reached out his small hand and took hers. I missed you too. I used to dream you would come and find me. I am so sorry I let them take you away from me. That was not on you, Clara, Will said, his eyes suddenly serious and old. None of it was your fault. Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks. When did you get so wise? A small smile touched Will's lips. The sisters at the mission school, they taught me how to forgive. Forgive who? She asked. Everyone, he said, his voice soft. Mama and Papa for leaving, the people who separated us. He gave her hand a little squeeze. Even myself. For not being strong enough to find you sooner. Clara bent down and kissed his forehead. You are the strongest person I know, Will. Stone. Stone. That is our new name. Clara and William Stone. Ezra is going to adopt us both, make us a real family. We were always a real family. Will's eyes drifted closed. Blood does not make family. Love does. Clara sat there long after he fell asleep, holding his hand, watching him breathe. 7 children now, 4 boys, 3 girls. A family built not from blood but from choice. And for the first time in her life, Clara felt complete. The years passed the way years do. Slowly when you are living them, fast when you look back. Clara watched the children grow, watched the ranch prosper, watched Ezra's hair go from gray to white. She was 17 when he first got sick. Just a cough, he insisted, waving away Bessie's concern. Nothing to worry about. But Clara saw the truth. He tried to hide. The way he moved slower, the way he tired easier, the way he sometimes stopped in the middle of a sentence like he had forgotten what he was saying. You need to see the doctor, she told him. I have seen doctors. They do not know anything. Please, for me. He looked at her. This girl he had pulled from the snow 5 years ago. This woman she was becoming, and something in his expression softened. All right for you. The doctor came the next day, examined Ezra, talked to him in private, then came to find Clara in the kitchen. His heart, the doctor said quietly, it is wearing out. Could be years yet, could be months. No way to know for certain. Clara felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. There must be something you can do. I can give him medicine for the pain, tell him to rest. But the truth is, Miss Stone, some things cannot be fixed. The doctor put a hand on her shoulder. I am sorry. That night, Clara found Ezra on the porch staring out at the mountains. You heard? He said, not a question. Yeah, I am sorry. I wanted to tell you myself. Do not apologize. Clara sat down beside him. Just tell me what you need. Ezra was quiet for a long moment. I need to know this place will be okay when I am gone. That the children will be taken care of. That everything I built will not just disappear. It will not. How can you be sure? Clara looked at him. This man who had saved her life, who had given her everything. Because I will make sure of it, she said. I will take care of the ranch, take care of the children, keep this family together no matter what. That is a big promise. I have made bigger. Clara smiled through her tears. Remember, I promised I would survive. I promised I would be something. Well, this is what I'm going to be. The person who keeps your legacy alive. Ezra's eyes were wet. He reached out and took her hand. You are already more than I ever dreamed, he said quietly. When I found you in that snow, half dead and all alone, I thought maybe I could give you a chance. Maybe help you survive. I never imagined what? That you would end up saving me? Clara squeezed his hand. We saved each other. That is what family does. The months that followed were hard. Ezra grew weaker. The children took turns sitting with him, reading to him, telling him stories about their days. Ruby May played piano for him every evening. Will drew pictures and tacked them to the wall beside his bed. Jonas and Samuel took over more and more of the ranch work, proving they had learned their lessons well. And Clara held everything together. She managed the business, negotiated with buyers, handled the paperwork, made the hard decisions that Ezra could not make anymore. At 17, she was running one of the largest ranches in the territory, and she did it with a competence that surprised everyone except Ezra. "I knew you could do this," he told her one evening. "Knew it the moment I saw you standing up to Crawford in town. You have got fire in you, Clara. Always have. I learned from the best." "No," Ezra shook his head. "You were always this way. I just gave you room to grow." Crawford came to visit once late in the fall. Clara met him at the gate, her back straight, her eyes hard. "What do you want to talk?" Crawford held up his hands. "That is all, just to talk." Clara studied him. Something had changed in the man since the open house. The sharp edges seemed worn down. The anger in his eyes had faded to something more like regret. "5 minutes," she said. They walked toward the house. Crawford looked around at the ranch, at the children playing in the yard, at the life that filled every corner. "I heard Ezra's sick," he said finally. "News travels fast. I came to say—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I came to say I am sorry for the trouble I caused for trying to tear this place apart." Clara stared at him. "Why?" "Because I was wrong." The words seemed to cost him something. "I spent 30 years hating your father for winning that card game. 30 years trying to take back what I thought was mine. But watching him build this, watching what he has done for these children—" Crawford shook his head. "That land is not worth a fraction of what he has built here. Then why did you fight so hard for it? Because I did not know what else to do." Crawford's voice was rough. "My father taught me to hate, taught me that the world owed us something. Took me a long time to realize he was wrong." Clara was quiet for a moment. "What changed?" "My daughter was born." A ghost of a smile crossed Crawford's face, and I looked at her, this tiny, perfect thing, and I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be, what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. And I realized I did not want her to grow up the way I did, full of anger, full of hate. He turned to look at Clara. "Your father, Ezra, he built something good here, something pure. I spent years trying to destroy it, and all I did was prove how small I really was." Clara did not know what to say. The man standing before her was not the enemy she had been fighting for 2 years. He was just a person broken, flawed, trying to find his way. "I appreciate you saying that," she said finally. "But I cannot speak for Ezra. If you want his forgiveness, you will have to ask him yourself." "I know." Crawford nodded. "That is why I am here." Clara led him inside. Ezra was in the parlor, propped up in his favorite chair, a blanket across his legs. He looked up when Crawford entered, and something complicated passed across his face. "Virgil, Ezra." Crawford stood awkwardly, his hat in his hands. "I came to—" I wanted to spit it out. "I am sorry." The words came out in a rush for everything. The threats, the rumors, the years of trying to take what was not mine. "I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I am sorry." Ezra was quiet for a long moment. Clara held her breath. "Sit down, Virgil," Ezra said finally. Crawford sat. The two men looked at each other, decades of conflict hanging between them. "You know what Catherine used to say?" Ezra asked. "She used to say that grudges were like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Said the only person they hurt was the one holding them. Smart woman, she was." Ezra's voice was soft. I miss her something fierce every single day. I'm sorry for that, too. About her? About Emma? About all the hurt you have had to carry. That is the thing about losing people. Ezra looked across the room at the children peeking from the doorway, and at Clara, who stood like a sentinel beside his chair. It can either break you clean in two, or it can teach you something. It took me a good long while, but I finally learned my lesson. I learned the only way to beat back the darkness is to build something new, something worth the risk of losing. He looked square at Crawford. You have a daughter now. That is your chance to start over. Do not waste it fighting battles that are already over. I will not. Crawford's voice was thick with emotion. I swear it. Good. Ezra put out his hand. Then I forgive you, Virgil, for every last bit of it. Crawford took his hand and held on tight. Two old rivals finding a little peace in the twilight. Thank you, Crawford whispered. Do not thank me. Just do better. Be a better man for that little girl and for yourself. An hour later, Crawford was gone. Clara watched him ride off, feeling a heavy weight lift right off her soul. You really forgive him? She asked Ezra. Life is too dang short to hold on to hate, Clara. I learned that the hard way. He reached for her hand. You promise me you will remember that. Promise you will not let anger eat you alive like it did Virgil all those years. I promise. Good. Ezra gave a small smile. Now, help me up. I want to see that sunset just one more time. Clara helped him out to the porch. They sat there together, watching the sky blaze up in gold and pink and purple. Is that not beautiful? Ezra said, his voice soft. It surely is. You are going to take care of them, Clara. All of these young'uns. I know you will. I will. And you are going to remember what this place is truly about. It is not the land. It is not the cattle. It is the family. I will remember. And you are going to know deep in your bones every single day that you were worth saving. Ezra turned to look at her, his old eyes shining with tears he would not let fall. That is the most important thing of all. You were always worth saving, Clara Stone. From the very first second I laid eyes on you. Clara could not find her voice. The tears were coming too fast. I love you, she finally managed to choke out. Papa, I love you. I love you too, daughter. Ezra squeezed her hand, more than words could ever tell. He passed on 3 days later, quiet as a whisper, with his family all around him. They buried him under the big old oak tree, right next to Catherine and Emma. Clara stood there at the grave. Her brothers and sisters gathered close, and she said the words she had been holding in her heart for months. Ezra Thornton was the finest man I ever knew. He found me when I was lost. He took me in when I was broken. He gave me everything a person could ask for, a home, a family, a reason to get up in the morning, and love. And he never asked for a single thing back except that I try to be the woman he always believed I could be. She looked at all the children around her, Jonas and Ruby May, Samuel and Lily Grace, Toby and Will, her family, her duty. He taught me that family is not about who you are born to. It is about who you choose. It is about showing up for one another day in and day out, come what may. It is about building something together that is stronger than any one of us could ever be on our own. She took a long, steady breath. This ranch will keep going. This family will keep going. And Ezra Thornton's spirit will live on in every acre of this land, every fence post, and every child who finds their way to our door, because that is what he built. Not just a ranch, but something that would last, something that mattered. She looked down at the fresh earth. Rest easy now, Papa, you surely earned it. The years flew by. Clara became the woman Ezra always knew was inside her. She ran that ranch with a gentle hand but a backbone of pure Texas steel. She took in more children, 5 more, then 10, until the big house was just busting at the seams with noise and laughter. She raised them just like Ezra raised her, teaching them how to work, but more than that, how to have a good heart, how to get back up when you are knocked down, and how to believe that every soul is worth saving. Jonas became foreman, married a sweet girl from town, and had 3 kids of his own. Ruby May became a teacher, starting a little school right there on the ranch. Samuel turned into the best horse trainer in the whole territory. finally putting his own father's ghost to rest. Lily Grace eventually remembered her past, made her peace with it, and spent her life helping other folks heal from their hurts. And Toby, he used his knowledge of the land to guide folks safely through the mountains. And Will, her baby brother, he grew into a fine, strong man who stood right by Clara's side through it all. Clara never did marry. She never felt the need. She had her family, dozens of them by the end, all children and grandchildren of the heart. And she kept Ezra's legacy burning bright, just like she promised. Every morning she would walk out to that old oak tree and stand by his grave. Still here, she would say, still going, still taking in the ones nobody else has room for. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, she could almost hear his voice whispering, "That is my girl." On her 60th birthday, Clara stood on the porch of that ranch house looking out at all they had built. The barns, the gardens, the orchards, and the dozens of children running and playing in the yard, their laughter filling the whole valley. Her children, her legacy. Ruby May came and stood next to her hair gone gray but her eyes still full of spark. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything," Clara smiled. "And nothing at all. Just how it all started and how it all turned out. Any regrets?" "Not a single one," Clara told her sister. "Just one," Ruby May said softly. "That Ezra could not be here to see this, to see what we all became." "Oh, he sees it," Clara said, touching her own heart. "Right here. He sees every bit of it." A noise down at the main gate got their attention. A rickety wagon was pulling up, driven by a woman who looked worn clean through, with two small children huddled in the back. "Well, here we go again," Ruby May said with a little chuckle. Clara laughed. "Here we go again." She walked down those porch steps and across the yard, straight toward that gate, toward the next story, the next child, the next chance to do for someone what Ezra had done for her so long ago. The woman climbed down from the wagon, her face a mask of worry and fear. "Please," she said, "I heard there was a place out here, a safe place for children who do not have anywhere else to go." Clara smiled. It was the same smile she had been given out for 45 years, a smile that said, "You are safe now. You are home." "You heard right, ma'am," she said. "Welcome to Thornton Creek Ranch." And she opened her arms up wide. The story that began with a little girl left all alone ended with a home that was always full. The child they called Worthless became the woman who showed hundreds of others their true worth. Clara Stone Thornton lived for another 30 years. She saw 5 generations of children come through that ranch. She saw the world change in more ways than you can count, but the one thing that mattered most never did. The belief that every single person was worth saving. The knowledge that family was something you built with your own 2 hands. The truth that real love never, ever dies. It just grows and spreads like a wildfire, touching every life it meets, making them better, making them whole. That was Ezra's legacy. That was Clara's legacy. And that was the legacy of every broken child who ever walked through the gates of Thornton Creek Ranch and found the one thing they thought they had lost forever. Home. A real home. The kind that lasts for all time. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.